Right, it's been a very busy week for journalists and media. The round-the-clock coverage of the ANC's Elective Conference, which has come to an end in the wee hours of the morning. This morning, a large and important event, both exciting and stressful. Media houses compete for readers and viewers, trying to outdo each other, from delays and dances, scuffles and puppet commentators, social media opinion and analysts. How balanced how was the coverage? How did we fare? Well, joining us in studio now is Associate Professor in Media Studies at WITS and Chair of the South African National Editors Forum Ethnic and Diversity Committee, Professor Glenda Daniels. We're also joined by SABC's digital producer, Dine Mekuto, and reporter, you saw her on the ground, Ntakwana Ngatane. Great to have you all. Let me start with you, Professor. In fact, I'm going to start with you, Ntakwana, because we heard last night that there was no food for the delegates, that this was really tough. Long working hours. Just give us a sense of what it's like to cover something like this.
I'm still struggling to remember what day of the week it is.
Okay. You know your name at least. You responded. That's good.
Yeah. Look, it was stressful, but I think we had a great team behind us. And I think I have to mention people by names. Our political editor, Sophie Mukwena, our head of TV news, Notando Maseko, head of radio news, Bulelo Ditlakanyane, and our national editor, Nyana Molete. These were people, I think, that were the engine behind all of the journalists that you saw on the ground. And like you said, I think we were the winning team, because if you listen to what social media is saying, they're raving about our performance, about how balanced we were.
We're all going to be biased on this regard. Professor, will you venture as to how the different media houses fared?
Yeah, well, I've got two big points to make about that. I thought it was complete saturation with the ANC conference, to the point where we weren't watching any other news, which is fantastic, because this was the most important thing and it's going to affect us for the next 10 years. However, I think media all over the world, and including here, when they cover elections, they cover the personalities. And it's like it became a two-horse race. So the focus was on Cyril, NGZ, who's it going to be? Is it a he? Is it a she? So I was left wondering, but what about the policies? So even at the conference itself, you know, the policies were pushed right to the end because so much drama was taken up by the counting issue. But I thought, given that it was a 5-day conference, there was so much coverage, 5 weeks before, 5 months before, I still don't know what. And I wanted that from journalists and analysts on media. What is a radical economic transformation all about? How is it going to be implemented? So I didn't get that from Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, what it was, nor did I get why is she a feminist? Did she support women? Where's the emancipation of women? How are we going to break patriarchy?
So this is fair enough, but is it the media houses at fault, or Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's own team not showing what she believes in firstly, and also on policy? It could be argued that the ANC is not pushing its own policies because it is so focused on leadership right now as well. So
it's
we're
both.
Reflecting.
It's both. So what media could also have done, okay, let's leave NGZ alone for a second and bring Cyril into the picture. What is his new deal? I still don't have it. What happened to the NDP? So if, for instance, I was sitting here and I've got Cyril next to me, Cyril Ramaphosa, okay, so I would say, what is the new deal? How is it going to be implemented? You know, I think it's about jobs and it's about economic growth and employment. But there's no plan, and there's nothing that we are telling the public. So that's my issue. But the other thing was, I don't think it's fair to say that all media were biased in favor of one candidate or the other. I thought the Sunday Independent made a very blatant, you know, favoritism towards Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, and other media maybe. People say they favored Cyril Ramaphosa, so maybe that was the case, but there were other candidates as well. And you know, we don't know much about what was Lindiwe Sisulu saying on social media. It is a must. in big capitals, MUST. I thought it could have stood for, maybe it was standing for something, and we don't know. Maybe it doesn't.
Okay, so wall-to-wall coverage, but maybe we could have gone deeper into some of the issues. Didi, I'm interested because the question for media is always, you know, we are news people, so you're very interested in an ANC conference, but how interested are people in politics? Do we overwhelm them? Should we give them other news? What did you gauge on social media about that general sort of level of interest?
Just to begin with the numbers, on the hashtag SAANC54, we had impressions of about, this is people commenting on the hashtag, right?
Okay,
it's
so
on their
engaging
timeline.
with the hashtag.
It's on their timeline and they engage with it. There were about 8 million people in a space of 2 days.
Wow.
Right? So it could be Dini commenting on it 10 times, but still, the engagement is there. A lot of people are talking about it. It reached about 6.7 million accounts. Now, on the part of the media sometimes lags behind because of social media. I'll give an example. Julius Malema was one of the top tweeters or people that were tweeting about it. Before they even announced that CR17 had won, he had tweeted, "It's a boy."
Yeah.
You know?
And he's often right.
You know, he drops the files. That's how people know him on social media. He drops the files. He's almost always right. So he got it right. And by the time it came out on mainstream media, it was already out on social media. So I think social media could also be a threat to traditional media, us guys. You know?
Or maybe we need to start learning how to utilize it and say, look, we are reliable, so we don't break results before they happen. But it is interesting that Julius Malema is saying this on social media because he is such a strong commentator and he's been right in the past. And Sakwana, let's go to the relationship between the media and the ANC. And I personally believe that those relationships can influence media coverage, and it wasn't looking good. It was tense. Just give me a sense of how journalists were interacting.
I think for me it started with President Jacob Zuma's opening address, where he really rebuked the media, rebuked the judiciary, and it felt like, you know, we shouldn't be here. But it kind of felt better when Gwede Mantashe held a media briefing with Zizi Kodwa to say thank you for the relationship that we had. It was hard sometimes, you asked difficult questions, but that's the nature of the relationship, you know. And Zizi Kodwa further talking to SABC to say, look, if the ANC is not doing what it's supposed to do and people go to courts, it's not the fault of the media that they report on it. And of course, new President Cyril Ramaphosa coming out in his final speech to speak out against this incident with one journalist who was manhandled. So kind of an sort of up and down. But at the end of it, I think what you saw with the barricades and the information not coming out, I mean, with the 68 votes, people didn't know what was happening for a whole day. We were just, you know, trying to get information here and there. So I think they could have communicated better. In terms of engaging the media, you know, with what was going on. So a lot of what was probably perceived as negative from the media came from lack of information from the ANC. Yeah. But I think I also want to agree with the fact that the other issue was the issues that we were handling. We were so focused on the numbers in the election, and even the conference itself was so focused on the numbers and the election, and you saw that the policy discussions and commissions happened on the last day, and it was rushed, and the briefings came like 10 minutes after one another. So even that, I think, was not done justice by the ANC itself.
Because it's hard to unpack it if there's not time. SANEF engaged with the ANC about that security guard manhandling a journalist caught on camera. How positive or negative has that been?
Well, the outcome has been positive because Cyril Ramaphosa mentioned it in his speech, his maiden speech, it's called, and he almost apologized for it, and he said this shouldn't be happening in a democracy.
Which is responsive.
So that was very good. It was responsive, and SANEF's happy about that. But I just want to pick up on a point about the barricades. The journalists were at gate 16. And the plenary session was happening at gate 5. If you can picture how far that is away from each other, it's an Uber drive if you don't have a car. So they really, and it's very different from Mangaung, because then you could mingle with the delegates, you could speak to them, you could get stories, you can actually get a sense of what was happening. Here, in fact, journalists were shunted like cattle. So I thought that was like really unfortunate. You know, the high security, they actually treated journalists like they needed guns to be, and checked your accreditation and your...
I guess the issue was delegates speaking to journalists and then changing things.
Yes.
But like you say, the party itself has become much more careful, maybe even paranoid about that. And that's not our issue. That's not media trying to get divisive news. That represents what's happening in the party if you're scared of delegates talking about each other.
Absolutely. It's a paranoia that's crept into the ANC, unfortunately. But you see that paranoia right at the top with Jacob Zuma, because he knows he's got a lot of enemies, and all his energy in the last 5 years has been spent trying to ward off this and that, rather than governing, you know. So, and then he's lumped the media in. The media's just doing what it's supposed to do, which is to get the news out to the publics, the various publics of the country. And in order to do that, they need unrestricted space. And oh, by the way, what was very good about all the different coverages is the unmediated nature of it. You know, in the past there'd be a session or plenary or whatever, and then a journalist would summarize and come and give that bit that they thought was particularly important to their audiences. So what happened at this conference, you just have rolling, maybe sometimes too much rolling coverage, but it just carried on. And you got a sense of the frustration during the counting, for instance, the top 6 counting, you know, when it was supposed to be announced at 5:30, everyone's still waiting, and journalists. So
I was there trying to buy time.
There you go, yes, everyone is trying to think of something to do and what's happening, and the frustration was very clear. So I think that was a good thing, because now publics get to know how journalists work. They don't...
It's become honest and transparent, and people are seeing behind the scenes. Talking about President Jacob Zuma, you have to tell us about the reaction to that video. It was Nicholas Bauer from ENCA who caught President Jacob Zuma reacting to Cyril Ramaphosa being elected.
I'm glad you credited him, because just before we came in, we actually saw a tweet from him saying, if you're going to use my video, at least have the decency of crediting it to me. Yeah, he is right, you know, because it's one of the most shared media from this particular hashtag ANC54. I checked the numbers just before I came in. It had more than 10,000 retweets, right? And it was quite a telling visual. And we were actually discussing it before we came in. And we had different explanations of the facial expression that President Zuma gave. But people were just saying, wow, that's beautiful, because no one else thought about it. And he must have pre-planned it, and he got that image that could win him awards. People were really engaged on that.
It went global. And social media and mainstream media works together. I don't know if you want to comment on the scuffle that was talked about, then caught on social media.
Look, I think, again, this is an issue that came out in one of the media briefings, the LAN media briefing on the commission, where apparently one of the journalists had tweeted the video that was leaked from a closed session, but happened to be true that there was a scuffle. And the chairperson of the commission actually confirmed that the scuffle happened, you know, saying that there is a lot of anger around the issue of land, and it degenerated into something that had to be intervened by the Secretary General. So again, you know, one of those issues where you say, you know, it is true, it happened, why are you rebuking somebody, you know, for showing it?
Rebuking the journalist, naming things like that are worrying. And you talk about policy, something that media houses, journalists, many people have been concerned about is the sort of plans around communication, the media tribunal, and that was spoken about. So what was SANEF's view?
So 2 contradictory things have come out about the Media Appeals Tribunal, and we must remember it was actually passed for the first time at Polokwane 2007 during the bloodless coup of Thabo Mbeki. And since then, the ANC hasn't implemented it. As SANEF, we're very much against it because we believe we have a system that works. There's a Press Council of South Africa, and we moved after the Press Freedom Commission from independent regulation to co-regulation. In other words, we now have an equal number of public representatives on the Press Council to look into the errings and the mistakes of the media. And it's working extremely well. So now the two contradictory things that came out at this conference was, in fact, Cyril Ramaphosa, for instance, has never said he's wanted and he believes in more restrictions on the media or a media appeals tribunal. And Jackson Mthembu, who's apparently on his slate, yeah, he is on Cyril's slate, goes on TV and during the commission report back, and says, yes, it's always been there and we just need to implement. So, there's so much confusion and so many mixed messages, and this is just one indication of a whole lot of other mixed messages, around land, etc. But this really concerns me, that, will they do this again? Is it like a sword hanging over journalists' head to say, you've got to be a more patriotic media with more sunshine in your stories? Or what is it about? We don't know. So we wait to see. But and also that communication commission report back seemed to be a rehash of old policy papers that were just copied and pasted together to try and make it look like it's 2017 now, because they've added digitization to it.
All right, we're running out of time. Ntakwana, I guess maybe you want to comment on that. I don't know, the media was allowed into those plenary sessions, was allowed to take pictures of Zuma reacting. Your sense of the relationship going forward, perhaps, between the media and the ANC?
I think outgoing Secretary General Gwede Mantashe put it very succinctly when he addressed the media in his last briefing. He said, again, we had this relationship that was not easy, but that was necessary, and my successor is coming in. I will introduce him to you, but what you do with him is none of my business. It's humans
at the end of the day.
It's none of my business. But I think the point that I want to take out of that is him saying, respecting the role that the media is supposed to play independently, not because it's supposed to speak for what the ANC does.
Quick final comment.
Yeah, okay.
Very quick.
There's something I want to touch on. On the two videos you mentioned, the Nicholas Bauer video and the Sam Kokeli video, and also the video on the land issue, the scuffle. There's a difference. This was the narrative that I was picking up from social media. There's a difference in how us media practitioners view the news that we bring out and how people that are consuming our news on these digital platforms are viewing it. I'll make an example. On the Sam Kokeli issue with the security officer, people were asking for context. How did it start, right?
Yes.
And that was not provided. And there was a journalist from Capricorn FM who said, actually, if you could give the whole background, maybe the way you view this video would be different. Another one on the Gwede Mantashe intervening during that scuffle on the land issue. People were saying, we don't see Gwede Mantashe here, but you say Gwede Mantashe is here. You're saying there's a fist fight. We don't see any fist fight. So we see it another way, and people who are consuming our news see it differently. So it's important, that's the narrative people were saying, it's important to provide context.
That is a great lesson to end on. We do need to give that background more depth. And thank you for great coverage. All right, thank you. So that was Professor Glenda Daniels from SANEF, SABC's digital producer, Dini Mokuto, and reporter Ntakwana Ngatane.